£300,000 home does not actually cost £300,000. That is the number on the listing. That's the number you negotiate. But once you add mortgage repayments, insurance, remortgage fees, interest, maintenance, council tax, and legal costs, and everything else that comes with owning a home for 30 years, the amount of cash that could leave your bank account within that period could easily be about £750,000. Now, before anyone panics, not all of that money is lost. Some of it becomes equity, some of it really gives you a place to live. And if the property grows in value over time, you may still build serious wealth. But here's the problem. Most people buy a home without ever seeing or calculating the full cost of buying that home. They know their deposit, they know their monthly payments, they know the solicitor fees they need to pay to buy their first home. But they do not really look at how much interest they are going to pay over that period. They do not realize how much maintenance is going to quietly eat into their returns. And they definitely do not think about how that home could be paying for itself while they live in it. So in this video, I'm going to show you 3 things. First, the real lifetime cost of owning a £300,000 house for 30 years. Second, the mortgage decisions that quietly cost homeowners several thousands of pounds over the years. And third, how to use the home you already own to offset some of these costs we've talked about by renting out a room, renting a driveway, short-term letting, or using a garden room. My name is Abigail and I built a career in investment banking for 7+ years. And one thing I learned is that sophisticated investors do not just ask, how can I afford this? They ask, what is the full cost? What is the return? What is the risk? And how can this asset work harder for me? This is exactly how I want you to start thinking about your home. Quick disclaimer before we get into this. This video is for educational purposes only. It is not financial, tax, mortgage, or legal advice. Always check with a qualified personnel before making decisions. Let's use a simple example. You decide to buy a £300,000 home. You put down 25%, which is the deposit. That is £75,000 gone. You take out a mortgage of £225,000. Let's assume the mortgage is going to run for 30 years. And the average interest rate over that period is 5%. On that, your rough monthly payment is going to be about £1,208. That sounds manageable. But at the end of the 30 years, the total payments you would have made to the lender would be £435,000. That means interest alone over that period was around £210,000 when you only borrowed £225,000. And this is where people make their first mistake. They think of it as, I bought this house for £300,000. But the better question to ask yourself is, how much money has left my bank account over the lifetime of owning this particular asset? To answer that question, we are going to add up all the additional costs apart from the interest we just calculated to see how much it costs for you to actually own that £300,000 house. When initially purchasing the house, you're going to incur solicitor fees, survey fees, moving related costs. Let's just be conservative and average that at £2,300. Now let's add remortgaging fees. Most people do not keep one product for the whole 30 years. Often every 2 years or sometimes 5 years, people remortgage to get a new product. For this example, let's assume you remortgage every 2 years. Each time you do a remortgage, you may face a product fee, a valuation fee, legal fees, and sometimes broker fees. Sometimes the lender will cover majority of these fees. Other times, all of these will come from your pocket. Let's use some working estimates for these costs I've mentioned when you remortgage. Product fee, £1,000. Legal costs, £500. Valuation fee, £300. And broker fee, £750. Over the 15 times that you will do this remortgaging process, let's sum it all up to around £38,000. Now we move on to maintenance. This is where people seriously underestimate. Majority of the time, the rule of thumb is to put away 1% of the cost of your property to take care of maintenance. But that doesn't happen in real life. In year 1, you may have nothing to do, but in year 2, the boiler will break. In year 3, the roof needs some fixing. In year 4, there's a leak in the bathroom. All these add up. Over a 30-year period, maintenance is not optional. Maintenance is coming. If your property therefore averages around £400,000 over the period that you own it, 1% a year set aside for maintenance is £4,000. Over that 30-year period, that is £120,000. Now let's add insurance. £800 budgeted a year for buildings and contents insurance is going to be around £24,000 for the whole 30-year period. Council tax, let's average it at £2,000 a year. Over that 30-year period, it's going to be £60,000. Now, adding it all up, the total cost of owning that £300,000 house is going to be around £754,000 at the end of the 30 years. But this is very important. It doesn't mean that you lost £754,000 because the deposit and part of the mortgage becomes equity in the home. So the better way to think about this is to break that number into two. The total cash that left your bank account because you own that property being around £750,000 and the total non-equity part that left your bank account because you owned that property. In this example, if we add all those costs up, that's going to be around £450,000. That is the part homeowners never really calculate. 30 years later, they calculate the value of the property and it's probably around £700,000. They take away how much it costs to buy it and to them it's £300,000, but don't realize that they've actually spent so much more by owning that property and will say that they've made the difference between how much they bought and how much is valued now. Now, I'm not saying that buying a home is bad. I own my own home and it's usually an incredible wealth building tool. The point is, home ownership is not the perfect investment just because the value of the property went up. The real returns depends on the cost of ownership. And once you understand that, you start making better decisions. My light bulb moment about the real cost of owning a property happened when I had to remortgage my house a few weeks ago. Because I wanted to scan the market and get the cheapest rates, my new lender required a new valuation, legal costs involved, and I would have had to incur a broker fee if my broker was charging me outright. With that, I started asking myself deeper questions. How many times am I going to do this remortgage process? And how often will I have to pay these monies? Most of the rates we go in for are 2-year fixed rates. If I'm going to be doing this every 2 years, have I calculated the remortgage fees into the cost of owning this property? I decided in the end to go with my current lender, and it was as simple as jumping onto a new rate from the old rate that I was on without any of these costs coming into the question. So I asked myself, how many homeowners out there are actually calculating these fees into the cost of owning their home? And how many of them are using that to help make the decision on which mortgage rates to go in for, whether staying with their current lender or going to a new lender? Is that new lender's rate actually saving you so much more than how much you are paying to do the switch every 2 years? So far, this video has been a little painful. We've talked about interest, fees, maintenance, insurance, council tax, and other hidden costs of owning a home. But now I want to flip this. Most people think of their home as a cost. But a home is also an asset. And like many assets, it may have surfaces that can generate income to reduce your cost. A spare room, a driveway, a garage, a loft, a garden. A home that sits empty when you are traveling. Most homeowners are surrounded by unused capacity and they never monetize it. Now, I'm not saying everyone should do every strategy. Some people value privacy way more than income. Some people have children at home. Some people have restrictions with their mortgage, their insurance, and what the council allows. That is why you need to check before doing anything. But the point is simple. One income stream could make a serious difference over the 10, 20, or 30 years that you own that property. Let's go through them. The first one I like the most is the rent-a-room scheme. Under the current rules, you can rent a room in your home and make up to £7,500 a year tax-free. This is approximately £625 a month. I'm going to be realistic here. You could have a property in London where that extra room costs more than £625 a month. Therefore, you would have extra income that you will need to pay tax on. So it's best to sit down and calculate the tax to see the net income you're going to make every year, and you can apportion that towards the cost of your property. I personally think this is one of the most powerful ways to generate income from your property. The next income stream I'm going to discuss is unused space. Let's say you've got a driveway, a garage, or backyard space that you can use for storage. You can rent out some of these on public platforms like Just Park, your parking space, or rent out the storage on a platform like Stash B. This could end up generating you between £100 to £500 extra a month for space that was left unused otherwise. Now let's be honest here. The government will tax the extra income you are making. It doesn't fall under the 7,500 tax-free rent-a-room scheme, but there is a £1,000 tax-free allowance that the government gives from renting out something that's related to property or land. Your tax liability will now be the amount you've made within a year over that £1,000. It's worth sitting down to calculate the exact net amount you're going to make from that rental to see whether it's worth the trouble and see how much that can reduce the cost of your home. Also, depending on your tax band, a higher rate taxpayer may have a different allowance compared to a basic rate taxpayer. So it's worth doing the numbers before you decide to make such a move. The next strategy I'm going to talk about is short-term letting when you are away. Now, this strategy is not for everyone because if you decide to list your property on Airbnb, it comes with maintaining guest conversations, cleaning before and after, and also some privacy concerns. If you make an extra £2,000 by using your home for short stay when you are away, you need to be mindful of the cost that you needed to take out for that stay, which is cleaning and all those things, before you calculate the net you are making. But the important thing to check here is that, does your mortgage allow it? Does your insurance allow it? And what are the local council rules for that? In London, there is something called the 90-day rule, which does not allow you to rent your property on those short-term platforms like Airbnb beyond a 90-day period. Look into those rules before you decide to go in for this strategy as a way to make extra income from your property. The last strategy I'm going to talk about is one of the most ambitious strategy, but could be the one that could make you the most money. That is turning your garden home into a livable space. This is not a beginner strategy. It requires capital, it requires checks. You will probably need planning, building regulations, lender approval, insurance approval, and checking council tax before you decide to pursue this one. If you build a high-quality livable garden room, it probably is going to cost you around £45,000. And with this, you can rent it for between £700 to £1,000 depending on where you live. Naturally, you need to allocate costs back to the investment you made before you see the extra revenue that you are making from it as income that's going to help reduce the cost of your home. There are tax implications because you're making income from that arrangement. This strategy works very well if everything checks out. Lender is okay, insurance is okay, council is okay, building regulations are okay, and you get the go-ahead to rent it out as a livable space. I personally met a man who had done this. He turned his garden room into a studio and rents it for about £1,200 a month. This helps him now to offset his mortgage significantly. He's almost living mortgage free because of this arrangement. I'll give you a bonus strategy because I did this myself. I bought a property, which is a terraced house, and got approval to convert it into 2 flats. I officially converted it into 2 flats, so now they are registered at the council as 2 different dwellings. With this, I'm able to rent both the upstairs and the downstairs as 2 different properties, even though they are under the same freehold title that I own. The amount of money I make on the rent on the lower property pays for the full mortgage and cost of owning the whole house. This really opened my eyes to how a property can really be an asset. The reason why I decided to go this route is because I cherish privacy and I can understand how if my family lives in one part of the property, I do not want to mingle with people who are renting some other part of the property. So I made sure to officially split it into 2 so that I can get the income. This was not an easy process, but now that it's finished, I can see the benefits. I know this is a lot of information, so I created some tools on my website that you can use to help you calculate whether any of these income streams may be beneficial for you. Because I understand that people have different tax bands, I incorporated all these in my calculator. So you can plug in, maybe you've got a garden room, maybe you've got a garage, and how much you're going to rent it out for, how much your income is, how much tax you're paying, and how much you're going to net out by making that arrangement. And you're able to tell whether the arrangement is going to be beneficial for you or it's not worth your time. I've linked all of them in the description so you can get access to it. In conclusion, a £300,000 house does not really cost £300,000. And to make your home generate income to help you offset the cost of owning that home, you need to ask the deeper questions. You need to put in the work. You need to do the calculations and make moves that can help you to reduce the cost of your home legally. It's been Abigail. If you found this video helpful, you will also enjoy the videos in my series all about properties. I've linked it in the description box, or you will see it on the card somewhere on the screen. See you again next week.